Picture this, you go clubbing and you're rizzing up these two girls. A guy comes up to you and claims that you're standing in his spot. You break out into an argument and he decides to resolve the issue by stabbing you in the neck, piercing through both your carotid artery and jugular vein. You begin to lose consciousness as your brain is rapidly depleted of blood and oxygen. You lose the strength to stand as your legs buckle, the world tilts, and you drop to the floor. The people around you instantly recoil as they realize something is terribly wrong. Panic erupts. Bodies slam into each other as the crowd stampedes towards the exit. Your vision dims and the thumping music fades off as you sadly pass away. Paramedics arrive and take your lifeless body into an ambulance where you're rushed to the hospital and declared dead on the way there. In court, your killer denies killing you and blames it on his friend. He is eventually given a life sentence with a minimum term of 22 years. This was the bizarre death of Akeem Francis-Kerr. Martine Vik Magnussen. On March 14th, 2008, 23-year-old Norwegian student Martine Vik Magnussen went to a Diddy party with her friends. A nightclub where Diddy goes partying. As she's finished her university exams top of her class, she goes celebrating at the Massacre nightclub, one of London's most prestigious and exclusive clubs where many celebrities go clubbing. There, Diddy links her with Farouk, the son of a billionaire who takes her out of the club at 3 a.m. and they both take a taxi to his apartment. But as soon as they arrive, he suddenly grabs her by the neck, strangling her and raping her in his basement. He buries her body in rubble in the basement, flees the country, and never gets caught. If you're enjoying this video so far, make sure to like and subscribe and turn on the bell notifications to not miss exciting new videos coming very soon. And make sure to stay to the end to see all the insanely horrifying stories coming up in this video. The Pulse Nightclub Massacre. On June 12th, 2016, 29-year-old Omar Mateen walked into the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida, wearing a bomb vest and carrying a large bag of assault rifles, pistols, and ammunition. There were over 300 people in the club, and Omar started shooting at the crowd at 2 a.m. He also exchanged fire with an off-duty police officer who withdrew in the face of superior firepower. Omar then held the entire club hostage. He called 911 at 2:35 a.m. to notify them of the situation, warning them about bomb vests on hostages and that he had placed bombs in the cars outside the club. He also informed them that he pleads allegiance to ISIS. A huge SWAT team surrounded the club, and at 4:21 a.m., they managed to remove an air conditioning unit from the exterior wall of one of the club's dressing rooms, enabling a handful of survivors to flee to safety. Those who escaped told police that Omar was planning to place bomb vests on 4 hostages within the next 15 minutes. The SWAT team prepared to breach the wall of the building with explosives, executing several detonations at 5:02 a.m. just moments before they rammed into the wall with an armored SWAT truck at high speed, smashing into the nightclub. Hostages poured out of the gaping hole in the wall. SWAT troopers jumped out of the vehicle, engaging Omar in a gun battle with a dozen of them at the same time. After a long, intense gunfight, Omar was killed. By the end of the massacre, Omar had killed 49 people and wounded 53 others. Emergency responders carried victims to triage tents across the street. His motive was deemed an act of terrorism. At the time, the massacre at Pulse was the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. It prompted nationwide grief and debates on gun control and hate crime legislation. Memorials were held in Orlando and worldwide to honor the 49 victims whose lives were cut short. The Reina nightclub attack. On December 31st, 2016, 500 people were celebrating New Year's Eve in the Reina nightclub in Istanbul, Turkey. The clock hits 12, and instead of hearing fireworks, everyone hears gunshots. 34-year-old Abdulkadir Masharipov entered the club with an AK-47, with his first shots killing a police officer and a civilian at the entrance, before moving inside and opening fire on the crowd. He unleashed 180 rounds, killing 39 people and wounding 69. After the massacre, Turkish police launched a massive manhunt. Investigators used mobile phone tracking and CCTV to track the suspect's movements. On January 16, 2017, authorities announced the capture of the suspect. He confessed to carrying out the attack on behalf of ISIS. In September 2020, after a lengthy trial, Abdulkadir was sentenced to 40 life sentences in prison without parole, plus an additional 1,368 years in prison on top of that, just in case he managed to outlive his 40 life sentences. The Oval Space Nightclub. On August 30th, 2022, two rival gangs happened to be in the Oval Space Nightclub in Hackney, East London, at the same time. Violence broke out, and 24-year-old lieutenant of the 6-7 gang, Chris Kaba, pulled out a handgun from a bag and shot a rival gang member in the left leg on the dance floor. Chris chased the wounded man to the club exit, where he then fired again multiple times, hitting him in the right leg as he ran away. Chris sat into a 100,000-pound Audi Q8 owned by the 6-7 gang and drove away, escaping successfully. But 6 days later, on September 5th, 2022, he was involved in a high-speed police chase in the same car, eventually transitioning into a gang shootout, where he was shot and killed by police. In the subsequent trials, Chris was identified as the shooter in the Oval Space incident, and several of his colleagues in the 6-7 gang were convicted on firearm and drug trafficking charges. The shooting was linked to an ongoing rivalry between London gangs. Authorities noted that victims in the club and surrounding area had become targets of gang violence. The Oval Space attack highlighted concerns about weapons being brought into clubs and prompted calls for increased security checks at nightlife venues. Nightclub Q death. On October 19th, 2025, a 21-year-old man was waiting at the bar inside the Sweets nightclub in Queens, New York, when a dispute broke out over who was where in the queue. The argument quickly turned into a brawl. Suddenly, one man pulled out a knife and stabbed the 21-year-old in the chest. He staggered outside the club and collapsed in the parking lot. Bouncers and club staff immediately called 911. Police and paramedics arrived within minutes. The victim was taken to hospital, but died of his injuries shortly thereafter. Investigators secured the scene and recovered surveillance video showing the victim in a blood trail from inside to outside the bar. They described finding no immediate suspect at the scene. A person of interest was seen fleeing northbound in a white BMW, but as of the latest reports, no one had been arrested and the case remains under investigation as authorities appeal for witnesses. A spilled drink. On March 3rd, 2025, 62-year-old Paul Edward Koch arrived at a Miami-Dade bar in Redland, Florida, to have a drink. But just before he was about to take his first sip, another man knocked it out of his hand, spilling the drink he had just ordered all over the floor. Without even an exchange of dialogue, the two men break out into a fight. The friends of both men quickly get involved, escalating the situation into a huge brawl. Eventually, all of them get kicked out of the bar, and Paul quickly runs to his car to retrieve a semi-automatic handgun. He returns, fatally shooting the man who spilled his drink. He then moved into the outside bar area to kill his friend. Both were unarmed and had been part of the earlier argument. However, another one of the victim's friends was armed and attempted to stop Paul by shooting himself instead. Luckily, the others managed to stop and unarm Paul until he was arrested by the police. He was taken into custody and later charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. The victims were pronounced dead at the scene. In interviews, Koch said the dispute started over a drink. Imette St. Guillen. On February 25th, 2006, 24-year-old Imette St. Guillen went to the Falls Bar in Manhattan, New York. At 4 a.m., she was the last to leave the bar and was escorted out by 32-year-old Daryl Littlejohn, an off-duty police officer working as a bouncer at the bar. He took her to a desolate Brooklyn road where he brutally assaulted and raped her. The state in which police found her body later that same day was horrifying. Her naked body was wrapped in a quilt taped together, with her arms and legs tied together with zip ties. Her head was fully wrapped in packing tape, and a sock was stuffed in her throat while she was still alive. The cause of death was determined to be asphyxia by both strangulation and suffocation. Investigators collected surveillance footage from the area and noted that Daryl had been the last person seen with Imette. Within weeks, Daryl was arrested and charged. In June 2009, a jury found him guilty of first-degree murder. By July 2009, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Jennifer Moore. On July 25th, 2006, 18-year-old Jennifer Moore went out with a friend for what was meant to be a perfect night out clubbing in Manhattan, New York. Despite being underage, they parked their car right outside the Guest House nightclub in Chelsea, only for it to be towed to an impound lot shortly after them entering the club. After leaving the club, they turned up at the impound lot, only for the workers to refuse to return their car back. Her friend, being the owner of the car, collapsed, suffering an epileptic seizure upon not being able to retrieve her car at the impound lot. An ambulance arrived and sent her to the hospital. Jennifer was left alone without a car and had to walk her way back home in the middle of the night. 35-year-old Draymond Coleman starts following her. Jennifer got scared and called her boyfriend saying, "There's a guy following me. He's offered me drugs. He won't leave me alone." Draymond then kidnaps her, taking her to a motel where he rapes her and kills her. He then takes her dead body out of the motel room in a duffel bag and throws it into a dumpster outside. Investigators recovered motel surveillance footage showing Coleman with more. In March 2010, Draymond pleaded guilty to Jennifer's murder and was sentenced to 50 years in prison. Draymond's girlfriend, Crystal Riordan, a 20-year-old prostitute who worked at the motel, was also arrested and later pleaded guilty to felony murder for her role in the case, receiving a 30-year sentence. The toilet stabbing. On October 25th, 2012, 24-year-old Jamie Sanderson went to a packed student foam party at the E2 Nightclub in Kingston, London. After a night of partying and drinking, he goes to the toilet, which would soon be his last visit to one. Unfortunately, he went to the toilet at the same time as one of his ops, who happened to be in the same nightclub in the same toilet at the same time. Jamie was fatally stabbed by the man. He fled, leaving him on the dirty toilet floor, badly wounded. Club staff and partygoers attempted first aid while waiting for emergency services. Jamie was rushed to hospital but died from his injuries shortly thereafter. Police secured the crime scene and reviewed CCTV footage. Forensic teams combed the club and interviewed dozens of witnesses, though night-long chaos and fleeing crowds made evidence gathering difficult. Within a day, detectives identified and arrested a 22-year-old man in connection with the murder. The suspect was questioned at a London police station. No motive was publicly announced. Months later, the suspect was charged with murder. The E2 Nightclub Stampede. On February 17, 2003, a deadly stampede broke out at the E2 Nightclub in Chicago's River North District. The club was jammed with roughly 600 people attending a rave. Security guards used pepper spray to break up a minor fight on the dance floor. People around the commotion started vomiting or fainting from the spray's noxious fumes, and others, believing the club to have been hit with poison gas in a terrorist attack, rushed towards the exit. A surge of terrified clubbers stampeded towards the exit. As people fled, the only exit, a set of inward opening doors at the bottom of a stairwell, became blocked by a crushing crowd. People started to rapidly pile up in the staircase as all 600 people attempted to leave through one tiny exit. More and more weight added up on top, crushing the people who were compressed at the bottom of the staircase. Opening the door at this point became impossible. The situation quickly turned into a living nightmare for many, especially for those who were claustrophobic. When rescuers, fire crews, and paramedics arrived, they worked for hours to free the victims. 21 people had been killed by compressional asphyxiation. Over 50 others were injured, many with broken bones and lacerations. Investigators later found that the club was over capacity and violated fire codes. Exit doors did not open outward as required, and alarms were disabled. The club's owners and staff were indicted for contempt of court for ignoring past violations. In the aftermath, Chicago tightened club safety laws. The E2 tragedy is remembered as one of the city's worst nightclub disasters, illustrating how panic and poor exits can turn fatal. Keeley Bunker. On September 18, 2019, 20-year-old Keeley Bunker was celebrating her birthday with her friends at a concert by the rapper H in the O2 Institute in Birmingham, UK. At around 2:40 a.m., Keeley left the concert and was seen talking to Wesley Street, a 20-year-old acquaintance. The pair took a taxi to Tamworth and walked together toward Keeley's home. When they were walking through Wigan Park at 4:23 a.m., Wesley raped and strangled Keeley, later disposing of her body in a shallow pool in the park. Later that day, Wesley gave the police a detailed account of the route he walked with Keeley that night. He even showed officers the route on a drive around in his car during the search for Keeley. That same day, with the help of Wesley, police found Keeley's body and multiple of Wesley's belongings scattered in the same park, including his bank card, backpack and jacket, which was heavily stained in Keeley's makeup. GPS data from his phone showed that he returned to the location 7 times during the day. Detectives instantly identified Wesley as Keeley's rapist and murderer. In February 2020, Wesley Street was charged with her rape and murder and sentenced to life in prison. During trial, Wesley was also found guilty of 2 further counts of rape and 3 additional counts of sexual assault. The Lava Ignite Club Crush. On October 20th, 2011, 22-year-old Nabila Nanfuka attended a student rave event packed with hundreds of people in the Lava Ignite nightclub in Northampton, UK. Shortly after midnight, organizers announced the event was ending and a fire alarm was triggered. In the ensuing panic, hundreds of people rushed towards the exit simultaneously. At one narrow doorway, Nabila was caught in the stampede. She was pinned and later died from compression to her body. 2 other young women suffered serious injuries. Emergency crews found Nabila unresponsive and took her to the hospital, where she was declared dead. Cody Fisher. On December 24th, 2022, 23-year-old father and footballer Cody Fisher went to the Pop World nightclub in Solihull, Birmingham to celebrate Christmas Eve with his girlfriend and friends. He then broke out into a fight with 23-year-old Remy Gordon. After the night out, Remy wanted to take revenge, so he sent out Snapchat messages to all his friends to help him find and kill Cody. 2 days later, Cody attended another party with his girlfriend and friends at the Crane nightclub in Digbeth, Birmingham. Around 11:45 p.m., Cody was confronted by a group of masked men holding knives. One of them stepped forwards towards Cody and suddenly started repeatedly stabbing him in the chest, piercing through his heart. Other masked men also got involved in the stabbing. Cody collapsed immediately. Club staff and security attempted to help while calling emergency services. Paramedics arrived quickly, but Cody was pronounced dead at the scene. A knife blade was recovered at the club and shown to have 22-year-old Kami Carpenter's DNA on it. Police collected CCTV footage and witness statements. Within weeks, 3 suspects, Remy Gordon, Kami Carpenter, and 19-year-old Regan Anderson, were arrested. They were found guilty of murder, except Regan, who was convicted of a fray. In May 2024, Remy and Kami each received life sentences. The Coconut Grove Fire. On November 28, 1942, over 1,000 people were at the Coconut Grove nightclub in Boston, Massachusetts during the peak of World War II. At around 10:15 p.m., a fire broke out inside, spreading with extreme speed across the crowded club. People tried to escape through the revolving front door and other exits, but the building's emergency exits were poorly marked and bricked up. Thick black smoke and toxic gas quickly filled the club. 492 people died, making it the deadliest nightclub fire in history. Most victims perished from smoke inhalation rather than flames. Survivors jumped from second-floor windows or hid under tables and chairs. Firefighters and police worked for hours to evacuate the charred building and treat the injured. The aftermath revealed that flammable decorations and inadequate fire exits had worsened the catastrophe. The tragedy led to stricter fire safety codes nationwide. The club's owner and others were charged with negligence. Every year, memorials honor the victims, and the Coconut Grove Fire remains a landmark case that transformed building safety standards. The Luoyang Christmas Fire. On December 25, 2000, Wang Chengtai, an unlicensed construction worker, was performing illegal welding work to install a metal plate in a stairwell in the basement of the Dongdu commercial building in Luoyang, China, which was previously the site of a fire god temple. The sparks ignited flammable materials, including furniture and cotton flannel stored in the basement. A devastating fire broke out where over 400 people were celebrating Christmas in a packed dance hall on the 4th floor. Toxic smoke rapidly filled the room and trapped partygoers with limited escape routes. By the time firefighters extinguished the fire early the next morning, 309 people had died, most from smoke inhalation, making it one of the deadliest nightclub disasters in history. Dozens of suspects, including welders and building managers, were detained amid criticism over poor safety measures and blocked exits, and authorities pledged tighter enforcement of fire safety regulations in public venues afterwards. Ricardo Fuller. On March 7, 2020, 24-year-old Ricardo Fuller was celebrating a friend's birthday at a nightclub on Ilford High Road, London. Just after midnight, a gang confronted him outside the club. Suddenly, Ricardo made a run for his life with the entire gang chasing him down the street with large blades in their hands. Unfortunately, one of the gang members caught up to him and fatally stabbed him in the neck. Ricardo staggered back inside the club and collapsed on the dance floor. His friends immediately called 999. Paramedics arrived and took him to hospital, but he died of his injuries a few hours later. Police investigations identified 5 suspects, including cousins of the club owner, who were later accused of instigating a hate attack. 3 of the men fled abroad, prompting Interpol alerts. 1 suspect was captured when he tried to return to the UK. The other 4 remain at large. By mid-2021, authorities had charged 1 man with murder and others with conspiracy, but many fugitives are yet to be arrested. The Kiss nightclub fire. On January 27, 2013, in the Kiss nightclub in Santa Maria, Brazil, a live band was performing for a student party. One of the musicians set off a pyrotechnic flare on stage, igniting a flammable acoustic foam on the club's ceiling. The building was engulfed in flames within seconds. A stampede of panicking people rushed toward the only exit, a revolving front door, which quickly became jammed by the crowd, crushing hundreds of people. Flames, toxic smoke, and cyanide gas from the burning foam filled the room. In total, 242 people were killed and over 630 injured. Most victims died from inhaling the toxic fumes. 180 dead bodies were found huddled in bathrooms where people had tried to hide. Firefighters arrived rapidly, but found the nightclub's interior fully ablaze. In the aftermath, Brazilian authorities charged the club's owners and band members with manslaughter. Investigators criticized the club for having far more people inside than legally allowed, and for failing to maintain emergency exits and firefighting equipment. The Kiss fire led to nationwide reforms in fire safety regulations. The young victims were mostly in their late teens and early 20s, and memorials continue to remember those who perished. Joshua Green. On January 1st, 2012, 27-year-old father Joshua Green was attending a New Year's Eve R&B party at the Stars and Mayfair event suites in Sheffield, UK. The party, held in a large hall, was crowded with over 400 people. With only a few minutes going into the new year, Joshua was suddenly stabbed on the dance floor by an unknown person. He suffered deep wounds to his neck and back and collapsed. Friends and club staff immediately tried to save him as he lost consciousness. Police and paramedics arrived within minutes. Joshua was pronounced dead at the scene. In the commotion, people panicked and fled, trampling over the crime scene, which hampered evidence gathering. Detectives collected CCTV footage from the venue, and despite a metal detector being in place, the knife was found on the dance floor. Investigators interviewed hundreds of people, but many were reluctant to speak out due to fear of the police. No one has ever been charged in Joshua's murder. The Jet Set nightclub roof collapse. On April 8, 2025, a catastrophic roof collapse struck the Jet Set Disco in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. At about 12:44 a.m., during a performance by merengue star Ruby Perez, the nightclub's roof gave way without warning. There were approximately 515 people inside the venue at the time. Rescue teams and bystanders worked frantically to pull survivors from the rubble. Ultimately, 236 people were killed and over 180 injured in one of the deadliest nightclub disasters on record. Victims ranged from teenagers to middle-aged adults. The collapsed structure was quickly cordoned off by emergency crews, and hospitals treated scores of injured survivors. In the days following, the owner revealed that heavy machinery and water tanks had been on the roof, and that new ceiling panels had been installed just hours before the collapse. Authorities launched an intensive investigation into construction safety. The Dominican government announced compensation for victims' families, and public grief was expressed nationwide. Candles outside the wreckage and messages on social media paid tribute to those lost. The tragedy led to calls for urgent review of building codes and safety inspections for public venues. Brett Blake. On April 15th, 2012, 23-year-old father Brett Blake went clubbing at the Club Unique in Sheffield, celebrating with his friends on the packed dance floor. At around 2:35 a.m., a large group of masked men with knives suddenly attacked Brett and a couple of other club staff. Brett fought back, but was significantly outnumbered and repeatedly stabbed multiple times by the group of men. 2 staff members who intervened also suffered knife wounds, but survived. Paramedics arrived and took Blake to Sheffield's Hallamshire Hospital. About an hour and a half later, doctors pronounced him dead. A post-mortem confirmed he died from multiple stab wounds. Police quickly cordoned off the club and began interviewing witnesses and reviewing CCTV. The club had a strict no weapons policy, making the attack especially shocking. A murder inquiry was opened. In the days after the attack, Sheffield police appealed for information, as by then no suspects had been publicly named. Eventually, detectives arrested and charged 2 men from Sheffield in connection with his killing. In 2014, both were convicted of murder and handed life sentences. Charlie Cosser. On July 23, 2023, 17-year-old Charlie Cosser attended a large end-of-term party in a marquee at a West Sussex farmhouse. Around midnight, a fight broke out on the crowded dance floor of over 100 teens. Suddenly, Yura Varybruce, another 17-year-old partygoer, pulled out a knife and stabbed Charlie 3 times in the chest. The victim collapsed to the grass. Friends attempted to render aid as others screamed for help. Police and ambulance teams arrived within minutes. Charlie was conscious enough to identify himself, but he suffered a cardiac arrest en route to the hospital. 2 days later, on July 25th, he died from internal bleeding caused by a severed aorta. Investigators quickly arrested Yura, who admitted stabbing Charlie on the dance floor but claimed provocation. Witnesses at the trial mentioned that they heard Yura say, "I've stabbed someone," immediately after the attack. In June 2024, after a trial at Brighton Crown Court, Yura was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life with a minimum of 16 years. The incident highlighted the dangers of weapons at school celebrations. Bindy Johal. On December 20th, 1998, 28-year-old Bindy Johal, a notorious figure in Vancouver's underworld, was on the dance floor of the Palladium nightclub in Vancouver, Canada, when at about 4:30 a.m. a hitman walked up behind to Bindy's back, placed a gun at the back of his head, shooting him dead. Chaos instantly erupted as Bindy, a former nightclub promoter turned gang leader, collapsed to the floor. Bouncers and club staff rushed to help him, but he died immediately. The shooter fled without being identified. Investigators found multiple spent shells at the scene, but little else, as the nightclub emptied rapidly. Over the following years, police interviewed gang members and suspects. Several had motives to kill Bindy due to ongoing gang rivalries, but no arrests were ever made in his case. Bindy's death shocked the city and led to fears of more gang reprisals. He had been accused of drug trafficking and murder in the past. Bindy's funeral attracted media attention, and his unsolved execution-style killing remains one of Canada's most infamous unsolved murders in a nightclub. The Whiskey Au Go Go Fire. On March 8, 1973, the Whiskey Au Go Go nightclub in Brisbane, Australia was targeted by arsonists. At 2:08 a.m., 2 firebombs were detonated in the club's foyer, spraying gasoline across the entrance. Flames and toxic black smoke rushed up the single staircase into the crowded dance hall. Approximately 50 people were inside. Many people jumped from the second-floor windows to escape. Others tried to flee down a rear staircase that was coated with spilled cooking oil, which caused people to slip and fall. By the time firefighters arrived, 15 people had died from the carbon monoxide poisoning. The victims included club staff and 2 members of the band performing that night. Police noted that previous arson warnings had been ignored. 2 men with criminal backgrounds, James Finch and John Stewart, were arrested and later convicted of murder for carrying out the bombing. The outrage from this deliberate massacre led to major changes in Australia's nightclub safety regulations. Annual memorials are held at the site to honor the 15 lives lost. Nikitta Grender. 27-year-old Carl Want, a former nightclub bouncer and ex-boyfriend of 19-year-old Nikitta Grender, and his cousin 17-year-old Ryan Mays, current boyfriend of Nikitta Grender, worked together as double glazing salesmen. On February 5th, 2011, Carl and Ryan went out for a night of clubbing, drinking, and taking drugs in Newport, UK. The two also had a history of having threesomes with various women. Whilst at one of the clubs, Carl spiked his own cousin Ryan so that he could make his way back to Ryan's girlfriend's and his ex-girlfriend's house without the presence of Ryan. Carl arrives at Nikitta's house at 5 a.m. Nikitta is still a teenager and only 2 weeks away from giving birth. They have already decided on a name with Ryan, calling the baby Kelsey. Carl, desperate to get in, breaks into the house and walks up the stairs, entering the bedroom where Nikitta is peacefully sleeping with her soon-to-come baby. Carl proceeds to commit the most heinous acts, raping his almost 9-month pregnant ex-girlfriend whilst pulling out a knife and stabbing Kelsey through her mother's womb, who was waiting to come out into the world. Carl then slashes Nikitta's throat. After horrifically mutilating the mother and her child, he then sets fire to the bed, where the 2 unrecognizable dead bodies lie. He flees, leaving the entire house burnt down to ashes. Detectives found his DNA at the scene, which followed with his arrest. During the trial in 2012, Carl claimed that his cousin Ryan invited him to have consensual sex with Nikitta just hours before her death, but prosecutors presented evidence contradicting his story. In March 2012, he was found guilty of murder, rape, child destruction, and arson. He was seen yawning whilst being convicted by the jury, and whilst his 4 guilty verdicts and life sentence were being delivered. He was sentenced to life in prison. The case drew national attention in the UK as an example of violence against women, and led to an outpouring of support for campaigns on pregnant women's safety.